We're about to dive into one of the most heated debates in East Asian history. But here's the twist. Our tools aren't going to be shovels and brushes. Nope. They're going to be sounds and syllables. We're essentially doing a bit of linguistic archaeology to dig into a claim that has defined the relationship between Korea and Japan for centuries. So, it really all boils down to this one huge question. For more than 100 years, there's been this persistent theory that ancient Japan actually controlled a chunk of the southern Korean peninsula. But what if the words themselves, the very names from that time, tell a totally different story? Okay, so here's the theory we're talking about. The Imna Japan headquarters. The whole idea is that a place in Korea, called Imna, or sometimes Mimana, was basically a colonial base for ancient Japan. And believe me, this single concept has been a major source of tension for a long, long time. So, let's do it. Let's put that name, Imna, right under our linguistic microscope. Now, to get to the bottom of this, we can't just depend on historical texts. Those can be rewritten, right? We need to look at something much more fundamental, something that doesn't change so easily, what you might call linguistic fossils. These are little traces of history hiding inside words, and lucky for us, we've got a couple of key tools to help us find them. So our first detective tool is something linguists sometimes call the 1436 data law. Now, it's not a law like gravity, but more like a set of predictable patterns. It shows how certain consonant sounds tended to shift as words moved from Korea to Japan. Think of it like a decoder ring for ancient sounds. It helps us see how words can transform over time. And here's our second tool, the Dachi쓰테토 principle. This one is super specific, and honestly, it's absolutely crucial for what we're doing today. It basically explains how certain Korean sounds, like a soft ch, often harden into a sharp t sound when they get adopted into Japanese. You really got to remember this one, that ch to t shift, it's one of our biggest clues. All right, so we've got our tools ready. Let's put them to work on one of the most important titles in all of Japanese history, Tenno, the title for the Emperor of Japan. I mean, where did that word actually come from? I think the answer might just surprise you. Let's break it down piece by piece. The first part. Ten means sky or heaven. Well, guess what the Korean word for sky is? Chon. Do you see what's happening here? That Korean ch sound, just like our Dachi쓰테토 principle predicted, hardens into the Japanese t sound. Chon becomes ten. It's a perfect linguistic match. Okay, now for the second half. No. In modern Japanese, no is just a particle, right? It usually shows possession, like of. But the theory here suggests something fascinating. Its origin might be the ancient Korean honorific nim, a word of huge respect, used for a lord, a sovereign, even a god. The argument is that as this powerful word traveled, nim softened into no, but it carried its core meaning of respect along with it, into a new grammatical job. So let's just put it all together. You take the Korean parts, chunnim, and what you get is Skylord, or Heavenly Sovereign. I mean, that's a pretty fitting title for a powerful ruler, right? Then you just apply the linguistic shifts we've been talking about, and chunnim morphs almost perfectly into tenno. The sound and the meaning, they both carry over. Okay, so think about this for a second. If the emperor's actual title seems to have Korean roots, what about the very symbols of his authority? Let's check out the three sacred treasures of Japan. We're talking about the mirror, the sword, and the jewel, the absolute bedrock symbols of the imperial throne. Just take a look at this. The argument here is that the Japanese names for these sacred items aren't just random sounds. They seem to come from ancient Korean words that describe what they are or what they do. The mirror, kagami, is linked to the Korean word for brightness. The sword, sarugi, is linked to the verb to pierce. And the jewel, magatama, connects to the word for a knot or a joint, which, if you've seen one, perfectly describes its unique curved shape. And look, this isn't just some random guesswork. These shifts follow the linguistic patterns we've seen. The B sound in the Korean word for bright changing to a K sound in kagami, that's a known pattern. The J in the Korean verb for pierce becoming su in sarugi, that's another classic example. It's like the language itself is leaving a trail of breadcrumbs for us to follow. So we've seen how these linguistic rules seem to apply to the emperor's title and even his most sacred treasures. Now, it's time. Let's bring it all back to our central mystery and finally use what we've learned to decode the meaning of imna. And bam, here it is. The word imna splits into two parts, im and na. Im is an ancient Korean version of nim. Yep, the exact same word for sovereign or lord we saw in the emperor's title. And na,
That's an ancient Korean word for land or country, a root that's still around in the modern Korean word nara. So when you stick those two pieces together, the conclusion is, well, it's pretty direct. Imna isn't a Japanese place name. It seems to be a pure Korean compound word that just means the sovereign's land. The very name of this supposed Japanese colony is in fact written in Korean.
Okay, I know what you might be thinking. What about the Nihonshoki, Japan's oldest official history book? That's the text that's always used as proof for the Imina Japan headquarters. But does it really hold up when you take a closer look? Here's what's so wild. The Nihonshoki actually seems to contradict the very theory it's supposed to support. It is filled with records of the Japanese court asking for scholars, calendars, and new technologies from the Korean kingdoms. Think about it. Why would an empire need to keep asking its little colony for cultural and tech upgrades? Even the Japanese name for the powerful Korean kingdom of Baekje was Kudara, which comes from the Korean kunnara, meaning great country. You just don't call your little subject state the great country. So this is what it boils down to. Two stories, head to head. The colonial theory says Japanese outposts, a Korean state that serves them, and culture flowing from Japan to Korea. But the linguistic analysis, which is actually backed up by the context in Japan's own history books, suggests the exact opposite. Imna means the Lord's land in Korean. Baekje was called the Great Country, and the cultural flow was clearly one way, from the peninsula to the islands. And that brings us right to the heart of the linguistic argument. The evidence buried inside the words themselves strongly suggests that Imna wasn't Japanese territory at all. It was land ruled by, or at least deeply connected to, a Korean sovereign. When you follow this trail of words, what you see is a picture of a one-way street. Language, culture, power, titles, even the names of sacred symbols. All of it seems to have flowed from the Korean peninsula over to the Japanese islands, where it was then adopted and adapted. It basically flips the whole colonial narrative on its head. So it leaves us with this final thought. We always hear that history is written by the victors. And sure, official records can be shaped by power and politics, but language seems to hold a different kind of memory. It's like a fossil record of who was talking, who was moving, and who was influencing whom. And sometimes that voice tells a very different story than the one in the history books.